He started as a boxer, quick hands, a dream of making it big. But when life hit him harder than any opponent could, Kaboni Savage fought back in the only way he knew, with violence. From Philly's corners to a nationwide drug empire, he became untouchable, until one man broke the code and talked. And that's when Savage made a decision so evil, so unthinkable, that it would forever mark him as one of America's most brutal criminals. Kaboni Savage. Yeah, that name carried weight in Philly's streets. Some people knew him as Yusuf Billah, others as Joseph Amel, and sometimes his name popped up as Kaboni. Born and raised in North Philadelphia, he went to Frankfurt High and actually started out in the boxing ring at the Front Street Gym. He even had one professional fight and walked away with a win. But life threw him a hard punch early on. When he was just 13, his father passed away from cancer. That loss changed him. Instead of chasing boxing dreams, Savage turned to the streets. He saw the fast money in the cocaine game and jumped right in, starting small in the Hunting Park area before leveling up fast. At first, he was just hustling for other dealers. But by the early 90s, he started running his own thing, selling PCP straight out of his mom's house on Darien Street. Before long, he wasn't just a street seller anymore. He was a full-blown distributor, pushing PCP, marijuana, and even crack through a crew that controlled corners up and down Erie Avenue. By the late 90s, Kaboni Savage had leveled up again. Now he was the guy. He was moving serious weight, sometimes 5, 6, 7 kilos of cocaine at a time. And he wasn't just flipping product, he was cutting it, remixing it, and compressing it back down to stretch every gram and boost those profits sky high. That's when the Kaboni Savage Organization, or KSO, really took shape. This wasn't just some corner hustle anymore, it was a full-blown drug empire in North Philly. They moved heavy product, kept tight control over their turf, and didn't hesitate to use violence to protect it. Anyone who crossed them, real threat or not, was handled fast and harsh. Early on, Savage handled the muscle himself, but once his empire grew, his crew did the dirty work for him, without question. By that point, Savage wasn't just in the game, he was running it. In the early 2000s, Kaboni Savage had a solid crew around him, and one man in particular stood out, Eugene Coleman. That was his right-hand man, the one who helped move the product and handle all the cash that flowed through the operation. Within the KSO, Savage's so-called family, Coleman was basically the money man. But the muscle? That came from Savage's enforcers, guys like Kareem Bluntly and Lamont Lewis. They didn't ask questions, they just did what Savage said, no hesitation. The kind of loyalty that came with fear, but even the most loyal can break. Both Coleman and Lewis eventually flipped, cutting deals with the feds and testifying in court about how deep the KSO's drug business ran and how violence was just part of their daily routine. And that violence was real. Back in March 1998, Savage was near rival dealer Tobias Flowers' turf when a random driver, Kenneth Lassiter, accidentally tapped his car. Just a fender bender, right? Not for Savage. He demanded Lassiter pay up, and when the man apologized instead, Savage pulled his gun and shot him dead right there. That single act turned him into a name people whispered about in North Philly. And the wild part, Flowers saw the whole thing. By September 1999, cops caught up with Savage in Maple Shade for that killing. Inside the apartment, they found cocaine equipment, everything he needed to cook, cut, and repress his product. Even after that arrest, Savage didn't slow down. While sitting on house arrest on Darien Street, he was still deep in the game. One of his suppliers later testified that in just 6 months during 2000, Savage pushed between 160 and 200 kilos of cocaine, each one worth $24,000 to $30,000 at the time. In June 2001, law enforcement hit one of Savage's associates' homes and walked out with 5 kilos of cocaine and $350,000 in drug cash. But that was just the beginning of how dark things would get. Savage had this partner, Mansour Abdullah. a guy he taught how to step on coke, dilute it, and repress it for sale. But greed breeds suspicion. Savage started thinking Abdullah was shorting him or jacking up prices. In September 2000, Abdullah came by to collect some money and Savage paid him in a red sneaker box. Then he told Bluntly to ride with him for protection. But that was a setup. Moments later, Bluntly came back with the same red box, cash still inside. Abdullah was gone. When Savage sent Coleman to check, he found Abdullah slumped in his car, shot multiple times in the head, chest, and stomach. Savage kept that same cold logic with everyone. When he thought his own crew member, Carlton Brown, had killed his friend, Ronald Walston, he told Lewis flat out, "You gotta handle that." Lewis didn't hesitate. He found Brown and put bullets in his head and chest. Then there was Barry Parker. He was trying to take over a corner that belonged to one of Savage's dealers, Stephen Northington. When Northington complained, Savage told him straight, "Nobody takes nothing. You handle your business." On February 26, 2003, Lewis rode with Northington, spotted Parker, and shot him several times in the chest. Message sent. Anyone who crossed Savage or threatened his empire was done for. And if he even thought someone was working with the cops, that was a death sentence. In March 2003, he got suspicious of a guy named Tyrone Tolliver, a friend of Coleman's, believing he was a snitch. Tolliver was having trouble filling a cocaine order, so Savage played along, sending him with Coleman to an apartment where they processed coke. Not long after, Bluntly walked in and without a word, shot Tolliver in the head. Coleman helped dump the body. Savage had planned it that way. Killing Tolliver got rid of a possible informant, but it also dirtied Coleman's hands. Savage knew Coleman was soft, that if pressure came, he might talk. By forcing him to help hide a body, Savage made sure Coleman was tied to the murder too, so flipping wouldn't be so easy. Around that time, Savage took it even further. He met with Lewis and two top KSO members and made a blood oath. If any of them ever cooperated with the feds, their mothers would pay the price. Coleman wasn't in that meeting, but Savage made sure he heard about it loud and clear. That was his way of keeping everyone terrified, loyal, and silent. In 2004, Kaboni Savage finally faced trial for the murder of Kenneth Lassiter, but things took a dark, almost cinematic turn. Even while sitting behind bars, Savage stayed busy. Jail couldn't cage his influence. He kept sending threats, making promises of payback to anyone he thought might snitch or side with the feds. At the top of his hit list was the prosecution's main witness, Tibius Flowers. Savage wasn't hiding his feelings either. He told another inmate, Lewis, that he wasn't worried about the case because, in his words, Flowers would never make it to court. He said the same to another prisoner, basically sealing Flowers' fate before the trial even started. And sure enough, the night before trial, Savage's chilling words came to life. Flowers was ambushed and killed while sitting in his parked Ford Crown Vic on the exact same corner where Lassiter had been murdered 6 years earlier. No witnesses, no suspects at first. But later, word started to spread inside the prison system. A man named Northington confessed to another inmate that he hated snitches and bragged that he had slumped Flowers, sent him straight to rat heaven. Savage, too, couldn't keep quiet. He told that same inmate he'd spanked the case and expected to be out soon, believing he'd beaten the system by silencing the witness. And for a moment, it looked like he was right. Without Flowers' testimony, the prosecution's case fell apart. Savage walked free on April 8, 2004, but his freedom didn't last long. Just a few days later, federal agents rolled up on him again, this time for running what they called a massive multi-million-dollar drug empire stretching all over Philly. The feds said Savage and his crew had been flooding the streets with cocaine and heroin since the late 90s. This wasn't a small-time bust. This was the end of a 3-year FBI operation. Wiretaps, seized cash, guns, and a long list of people ready to testify against him. One of those witnesses, Kareem Bree Bluntly, never got the chance to speak. He was gunned down in North Philly while still cooperating with the feds. According to the FBI, Savage was the one who called the hit, just like he allegedly did with Tibius Flowers. In fact, the FBI's affidavit made it plain agents believed Savage ordered Flowers' murder from behind bars, pointing out how the killing happened right after visits from his known associates. His lawyer, Tariq El-Shabazz, called it nonsense, said there was no way Savage could pull off an execution from jail. But the timing told a different story. Even locked up, Savage kept the KSO's wheels turning. He was still giving orders, still threatening anyone who dared cooperate. In December 2005, a jury finally brought the hammer down. Savage was found guilty on 14 federal charges, everything from drug trafficking and money laundering to firearms and witness retaliation. On April 27, 2006, Kaboni Savage's run came to an end. The judge handed him 30 years in federal prison. But for the streets of Philly, his shadow still loomed large. Now Coleman was under serious pressure. Inside the walls, word had spread that he was cooperating, and that made him a target. The threats came fast, especially from inmates tied to the KSO, the same ruthless gang that Kaboni Savage ran. One day, in the prison visiting room, Coleman ran into Kadada Savage, Kaboni's sister. She pulled him aside, told him not to let these crackers break you. On the surface, it sounded like encouragement, but the undertone was heavy. Not long after, Kadada sent him a letter telling him not to say a word to the feds. She ended it with a chilling line, "Death before dishonor to your family." Coleman didn't think that was just a slogan. He took it as a threat to his own blood. Things only got worse. While sitting in a holding cell at the federal courthouse, Coleman found himself next to none other than Kaboni Savage and one of his boys. Savage didn't waste a second. He started talking about rats and how their families deserve to die too. That wasn't just tough talk. Savage meant every word. On prison phone calls, he was caught bragging about dreaming of killing snitches, saying things like, "Their moms will pay, their kids will pay. I'm dedicated to their death." The man was obsessed, fueled by pure hate. Then came the ultimate act of retaliation. Savage ordered Kadada to have Lamont Lewis firebomb the Coleman family home, just because Coleman was talking to the government. The call went down on the night of October 8th, 2004. Savage told Kadada what to do, and she passed the message straight to Lewis. The instructions were clear: hit the house that night when everyone would be home. She even drove Lewis to the block herself, pointed out the exact house, and warned there might be guns and a pit bull inside. Lewis didn't act alone. He brought his cousin, Robert B.J. Merritt, to help. Kadada promised them $5,000 for the job, blood money. At around 4 a.m., Lewis and Merritt pulled up with 2 cans of gasoline. Lewis kicked in the door, fired twice, and Merritt tossed in the flaming cans. The house exploded into flames. 6 innocent people died: Coleman's mother, his baby son, his teenage nephew, 2 young cousins, and another relative he saw as a sister. Marcella Coleman, his mother, was found on the floor, likely trying to save the children. It was pure horror. Afterward, Lewis called Kadada to confirm the job was done. But when he later realized kids were among the victims, he confronted her, and her response was cold as ice. Bash him? She barely paid him too, handing over only part of the $5,000. Merritt got $500 and a used car. Meanwhile, prison recordings caught Savage laughing about the murders. On tape, he mocked the victims' funeral, saying they should have poured barbecue sauce on them burnt people. He joked that the baby should have died, calling him a mouse born from a rat. He even laughed about the family's dead pit bull, calling it a rat in pit bull's clothing. Those tapes sealed it. Savage wasn't just proud. He was plotting more killings, vowing to wipe out other witnesses and their families too. The feds had seen enough. In 2007, the Attorney General hit him with special administrative measures, cutting off almost all his contact with the outside world. 2 years later, in April 2009, the hammer finally dropped. The indictment came down, charging Kaboni Savage, Lamont Lewis, Robert Merritt, and Stephen Northington with one of the most cold-blooded crimes Philadelphia had ever seen. After this indictment dropped, the court wasted no time appointing Kaboni Savage a lawyer, Christopher Warren. But because the feds were gunning for the death penalty, they had to bring in a second attorney too, Timothy Sullivan, who was certified to handle capital cases. From the jump, though, Savage wasn't feeling Warren. He complained, said he wanted someone else. So in 2010, the court swapped Warren out and brought in Christian Hoey to take over. But that wasn't the end of the lawyer shuffle. Sullivan had to step down later when he was appointed as a federal magistrate judge, so another replacement was needed. By November 2012, Savage got a new death penalty qualified lawyer, William Purpura. Sullivan and his partner officially bowed out a month later. By the time the trial finally kicked off, Savage was rolling with Hoey and Purpura as his main defense team. And this wasn't just any trial. The government had already made it clear they were going for the death penalty, especially on the Vicar, murder, and witness retaliation charges. Savage tried to fight that notice, but the judge wasn't hearing it. Even before the first argument was made, the courtroom battles had already begun, this time over who'd sit on the jury. Savage's team tried to get slick, asking the court to pull jurors only from Philly County and to widen the pool beyond just voter registration lists. Both requests got shot down. Hundreds of people were summoned for jury duty, filling out long questionnaires before being grilled during a tough month-long selection process that started November 5th, 2012. 30 days later, the final lineup was set. 10 white jurors, 2 black jurors, plus 6 alternates, 5 white, 1 black. Savage's lawyers didn't stay quiet about that. They threw in a few bats and challenges, basically saying the prosecution was striking black jurors unfairly. But after reviewing the strikes, the judge ruled the government's reasons were race neutral, and just like that, the stage was set for one of Philly's most infamous trials. When Kaboni Savage's trial finally kicked off on February 4th, 2013, the energy in that courtroom was tense from the very first day. The government came heavy, over 70 witnesses, more than 1,000 exhibits, and hours upon hours of wiretap conversations. This wasn't a small case. It was an all-out war in the courtroom. The prosecutors made it clear what kind of man they believed Savage was. During the sentencing phase, prosecutor Troyer hit hard, calling out the heartless way Savage had slaughtered and burned up children just to get back at a witness, then laughed about it. That one line set the whole tone. This wasn't about a small-time dealer. It was about a monster built by the streets. But the real weight came from the people who once stood right beside him. Eugene Coleman, one of his former partners in the drug game, told the jury straight up that their operation was like the Black Mafia. Then came Lamont Lewis, the same hitman who once worked under Savage before flipping to testify. He broke it down. Savage handled the drugs, and if there was trouble, he had his back. Another associate, Paul Daniels, summed up the whole mentality in one cold sentence: you needed protection in the drug game. That was the world Savage came from, and it was the same mindset that drove his actions. On an FBI wiretap, he said the quiet part out loud: without the witnesses, you don't have no case, no witness, no crime. That right there was the core of everything. To him, snitches were the enemy and fear was the weapon. Prosecutors explained how this kind of intimidation had Philly's justice system tied up in knots. Witnesses and their families lived in constant fear, knowing Savage had people on the outside who could still carry out his threats. Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Ehlers said it best. Savage bragged about having soldiers ready to move for him, even from behind bars. Most of the case was built around nearly 100 secretly recorded conversations from when Savage was locked up at the Federal Detention Center in Philly. Years earlier, agents had planted a hidden mic inside his cell. Those tapes caught everything: his rage, his plans, his confessions. And what they revealed was pure evil. Savage wasn't just threatening witnesses, he was threatening their families, even their kids. He talked about making other people's children suffer because his own had cried. He warned one witness that both he and his mother would die. In another call, he talked about killing everything that you love. The tapes only got darker. He said he wanted to smack a 4-year-old in the head with a bat. Then, talking about another witness, he said he'd blow his little girl's head off, describing her as like 5. He even promised to torture a prison guard, saying he'd set the man on fire and watch him jump around like James Brown. His hate knew no limits, and he made sure everyone knew that his war with rats wouldn't end until one of them was in a casket. Savage's threats didn't stop at words either. Prosecutors said he wanted his crew to sneak camera phones into the courtroom to secretly record witnesses while they testified, pure intimidation. He even told one person that his enemies' kids would cry just like his did. But then life hit him with an unimaginable twist, one that made all his violent talk sound painfully ironic. His own 9-year-old daughter, Kiara Cece Savage, became a victim of gun violence. She was caught in the middle of a gang-related shootout in York, Pennsylvania, an innocent little girl hit by a stray bullet during a stupid beef between the Southsiders and the Parkway crew. Chiara wasn't near her father's world. She lived with her mom, Jasmine Vidal, in Lancaster. That tragic day, she was just visiting family, hanging out near her aunt's house when 2 men pulled up and opened fire. One bullet took her life. She was a 3rd grader at Ross Elementary, full of promise, completely innocent. Police made it clear her death had nothing to do with Kaboni Savage. She was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Jasmine, her mother, also made sure people understood that. She told reporters she hadn't been with Kaboni for almost a decade, that she raised her girls on her own, far away from his chaos. She never even showed up at his trial. When Chiara died, Jasmine reached out to the prison chaplain in Colorado, the maximum security facility where Savage was being held, just to make sure he knew. And that's when the weight of all his violence, all his anger, came full circle. The same man who threatened to make other parents bury their kids was now a father grieving his own. Now, when Lamont Lewis took the stand as the government's star witness, he didn't hold back. He laid everything bare for the jury. How Kaboni Savage was the one who gave the order to burn down the Coleman house, and how Savage's sister Kadada handed him the address herself. She even drove him down North 6th Street and pointed out the exact house, telling him who would be inside, Coleman's mother and twin brother. Lewis broke it all down in detail. He told the court how he brought in his cousin, Robert Merritt Jr., to help him pull it off. Together, they carried cans of gasoline, tossed them into the house, and to make sure nobody escaped, Lewis fired shots up the stairs before stepping out to watch the place burn from down the block. Hours later, he learned the full horror. 6 people dead, including 4 kids and Coleman's baby boy, barely over a year old. And that wasn't all. Lewis straight up admitted he had killed at least 8 people for Savage's drug empire, including those 6 innocent family members. When asked why he did it, his answer was cold as steel. That was his job, his role in the organization. He explained that testifying was part of his deal with the feds. In exchange for his cooperation, he'd get a minimum of 40 years, but avoid the death penalty. His family had already been tucked away safely under witness protection. Then he started naming names and stacking up the bodies. He confessed to killing a rival dealer, Carlton Brown, back in 2001, one of 5 men Savage had wiped out because they either threatened his business or might have snitched. Lewis also admitted to killing people who had nothing to do with Savage at all. In one case, he shot a woman in the face after her boyfriend, another dealer, paid him around $23,000 to handle her for stabbing and trying to extort him. He got cash and access to the man's lawyer as payment. The wildest part, the very next day, Lewis got arrested, but for a totally different case tied to Savage. Later, once he started cooperating, he shocked the FBI by confessing to that woman's murder. They hadn't even known he was involved until he told them. He also talked about another hit job that never went down. His cousin had asked him to kill someone in New Jersey, but it turned out to be a setup. The cousin was working for the FBI the whole time, and the target didn't even exist. Lewis kept his tone flat and emotionless while describing how he climbed his way up, from a teenage corner boy to Savage's personal hitman. He'd known Savage since they were kids, skipping school and playing video games together. By 15, Lewis was selling $2 vials of coke for a dealer named Pumpkin, just trying to stack enough cash for a trip to an amusement park. That first day on the corner, he made a couple $100, and from that moment, he was hooked. Within months, he was helping package Pumpkin's dope in Savage's basement. A few years later, he was running his own corner, fully in the game, when Pumpkin, real name Ronald Walston, got killed in 2001. Lewis even tattooed his name on his neck. That was how deep the streets had sunk into him. In the end, his cooperation earned him 40 years, the lowest time possible under his plea deal. The judge called his testimony powerful, saying he seemed genuinely remorseful, but deep down, Lewis was haunted. Assistant U.S. Attorney John Gallagher recalled overhearing him tell a detective during a break that he was sure he was going to hell for what he'd done. The detective tried to comfort him, saying maybe God could forgive him, but Lewis shook his head, saying he was raised in church and knew there was no redemption left for him. Later on, Lewis gave a glimpse into the guilt that followed him. He said he and Merritt thought only Coleman's mom and brother were home that night. When they found out the truth, that 4 kids had died, they were crushed. He said they were messed up over it, realizing too late the real weight of what they'd done. Now, Savage's lawyers came out swinging, trying everything they could to keep him off death row. They rolled out 25 mitigating factors, basically reasons for the jury to spare his life. Their game plan? Paint Savage as a man who talked tough but didn't actually act on it. Those violent prison recordings? The defense said that was just jailhouse talk, all bark, no bite. They also attacked the witnesses hard, especially Lamont Lewis. They reminded the jury that Lewis had confessed to 11 murders himself, but still managed to dodge the death penalty by cutting a deal with the feds. To them, that smelled like a setup. Then they tried to humanize Savage, showing how he lost his father to cancer at 13 and grew up surrounded by bad influences in a drug-infested neighborhood. They even pointed out that in all his years behind bars, he'd never attacked another inmate, never fought with guards, and never tried to escape. But the prosecution wasn't letting any of that slide. Their comeback was simple. Savage didn't need to attack or escape because he ran his empire straight from prison. They reminded everyone that he was able to order the hit on Eugene Twin Coleman's family through a simple phone call to his sister. That kind of power spoke for itself. Meanwhile, one of Savage's old lawyers, Christopher Warren, had his own take on the situation. He told reporters that Savage only made those wild statements because he'd been pushed past the edge. Months in solitary, no sunlight, no family contact. Warren said they drove him insane. He put it bluntly, saying if you treat a man like an animal, don't be shocked when he starts to sound like one. Warren even argued that Savage wasn't threatening witnesses, he was begging them to stop lying about him. When it came time for closing arguments, Savage's trial lawyer, Christian Hoey, went on the attack. For 5 straight hours, he tore into the prosecution's witnesses, calling them liars chasing lighter sentences. He told the jury that these guys were case jumpers, changing their stories whenever it suited them. He pointed out how one witness, Paul Daniels, couldn't even keep his numbers straight. First saying Savage moved 10 to 15 kilos of cocaine, then later changing it to 50. To Hoey, that proved the feds were twisting the story to turn Savage into a criminal mastermind. Hoey's main argument was that the entire case was built on shaky testimony, no real evidence. He reminded the jury that Coleman, the man who claimed Savage threatened to kill all the rats, had zero proof. No footage, no witnesses, just his word. And Coleman wasn't exactly a model citizen himself. He was a known drug dealer whose own stories had fallen apart before. Hoey even brought up how Coleman once falsely accused another man, Kareem Bree, bluntly, of murder back in 2003, and police didn't buy it then either. Hoey looked at the jury and basically asked, if they didn't believe him then, why believe him now? But despite all the defense's effort, the jury wasn't buying it. On day 55 of the trial, they came back with their verdict, guilty on every single count. 12 murder convictions, the most anyone had ever received in Philadelphia's history, just one short of the state record. The courtroom was dead silent. Savage's lawyers made one last emotional plea to spare his life, bringing in his kids and girlfriend to show that he was still a father, still a man with people who loved him. But the prosecutors hit back hard. They told the jury that no prison could ever contain someone like Savage. They played the tapes again, those same cold recordings where he talked about killing informants' families, saying their kids gonna pay, their mother gonna pay. They wanted to make sure the jury understood exactly who they were dealing with. After the guilty verdict, the court gave everyone a week off before starting the penalty phase. When that part began, it stretched 7 long days. The jury heard every detail, arguments for and against the death penalty, all the aggravating and mitigating factors. And finally, on May 31st, 2013, the jury came back unanimous, death on all 13 eligible counts. That verdict made history. It was the first federal death sentence handed down in that district since 1988. A few days later, on June 3rd, the judge officially sealed it. Savage got the death penalty for 12 murders and 1 count of witness retaliation, plus life for racketeering and 2 10-year sentences for conspiracy and using fire in a felony. As the forewoman read the verdicts, Savage sat still, stroking his mustache, looking toward the jury, but not one juror looked back. They just stood up one by one and confirmed their decision. After the trial, Hoey said he was disappointed and that they'd be appealing the verdict. Meanwhile, the prosecutors kept it quiet. No victory speech, no statements. The case spoke for itself. The story of a man once feared across Philly, now facing death for the terror he unleashed. When it came time for Kadada Savage to face judgment, the federal judge didn't hold back. He called her actions barbaric and horrendous before sentencing her to life in prison for one of the most shocking crimes Philly had ever seen, the 2004 firebombing of Eugene's home that left 6 people dead, 4 of them kids. Right before Judge R. Barkley Surik handed down that mandatory sentence, Kadada stood up and tried to plead her case. She claimed she was innocent, saying she'd been railroaded. She admitted what happened was tragic, but stood firm, saying she hadn't done anything wrong. But the facts were already locked in. Back in May, she and her brother, the infamous drug kingpin Kaboni Savage, had both been convicted on 6 counts of murder tied to that deadly firebombing on North 6th Street. It was seen as one of the most brutal acts of witness retaliation in Philadelphia's history. Things got tense before sentencing. Her lawyer, Teresa Whalen, asked the judge to delay the hearing because Kadada had lost faith in her and wanted a new attorney. Kadada herself spoke up, dressed in a dark green prison uniform, her hair pulled tight, telling the judge she wasn't being represented properly. But Judge Surik wasn't budging. He told her straight that Whalen had done her job well and denied the request. Then her sister Conchetta took the stand to speak from the heart. She begged the court for mercy, reminding the judge that Kadada was a mother, had gone to college, and once held a regular job at an insurance company, that she wasn't just some monster, but a person who made terrible choices. Judge Surik didn't soften. He looked at Kadada and told her she'd shown no remorse. Then he made it clear that this sentence was about protecting the people of Philadelphia because she'd never be free again. He called the crime barbaric, horrendous, and made sure the punishment matched. He gave her life plus 10 more years for using fire to commit a felony. After court, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Troyer didn't sugarcoat anything either. He called it one of the most horrific crimes in Philly's history and said the sentence was exactly what she deserved. Then, fast forward to December 2024, President Joe Biden made a huge move. He reclassified the sentences of 37 people on federal death row, switching them from death to life without parole. Among those spared from execution was none other than Kaboni Savage, the same Philly drug boss tied to the deadly firebombing. According to the White House, Biden's move was part of his effort to push back against the federal death penalty altogether. He made exceptions for terrorism and hate-based mass murders, but for everyone else, the focus was on reform. When Biden first took office, he paused all federal executions. This new action went a step further, ensuring future presidents couldn't easily reinstate death sentences under today's standards.